Okay, this is Ron Watson. We're here from Deerfield Beach, Florida, and we're back with our weekly astrological and metaphysical talk. And today we're going to focus down on some issues about astrological interpretations that imply potential health problems in a chart. And there's several things I'd like to say as we go along here. Maybe I'll hold off until we get more people on board with us, but I know there's several people joining us today. One of the things I'd like to talk about is what you have to be careful not to do when you're doing astrological counseling, especially in regard to health, relationships. It's very important that you set perimeters and limits on what you say and how you say it, and I'll explain that as we go along. So we are live now from Deerfield Beach, Florida. We hope you'll join us, and we'll have a discussion on the health risks that are indicated in a chart according to aspects in the chart and planetary afflictions. So if you going to join us today, I hope you come on down and come online with us. I'm going to maybe adjust this camera a little bit more. If I can get the right adjustment here, we'll do that. Maybe we can do that. Let's see how this looks. Okay. A little bit closer, maybe. It's a little better. It's even better. Okay. How's that look, Lena? Good?
I'll get the image in 40 seconds.
Okay. So I know we have some friends coming in on the session from Newfoundland, Canada. Hope they join us tonight. And we look forward, hopefully, to seeing our Greek friend and Aprilius. And the other gentleman that is generally here is also, I forgot his name. And anyway, we hope you all join us and come on back on live with us. We'll be here for an hour. So if you're signing in, we'll give you a second to get online. It's just started just now. Also, I want to discuss some of the astrological indicators in a chart that can show more than just health issues, but can absolutely indicate violence and danger to your life. That's something else that's obviously affects our health in sometimes the most drastic way. So we'll be looking at that as well. And what's the difference between a man's chart and a woman's chart when it comes to these dangerous aspects that are often found in charts with Mars, Saturn, and Pluto? And how do they differ in terms of a woman's chart and a man's chart? There's a big difference. And we're going to discuss that as well. So I'll sit back, kind of relax here, and hopefully we'll get some people on board with us and we can begin this chat. This is live chat. If you send a question or have a comment to make, we'll do that. And my wife is sitting with a laptop over here also with it. Make sure we don't miss any questions that come in. And if you have a question, be sure to put it online for us so we can address it. And as soon as we see, let's see if we can tell if anybody's on board. We got 3 viewers already, it says. Okay. So we're gonna be talking about health issues in a chart and how you discern them and how you can actually avert them if you have a client and you can give them counsel. It's one thing to see things in a chart, it's another thing to teach people how to deal with it. And my practice for years has been to do both. I really feel you're remiss in your astrological counseling if all you do is you indicate the problems in a chart and leave somebody hanging with that. And you don't show them a way out, if you would. You don't show them a way to address those issues so that they don't become crucifying energies or crosses in their life or chart. And once you begin to do that, you become a great, I believe, a great astrological counselor. What is counseling about? It's not just showing people that they have an affliction in their chart that causes a problem in their life, but to address that in a way that they can resolve it in the future if they come across situations that cross is beginning to manifest itself in some type of afflictive manner in their life. So, so we still have we have 2 visitors right now, 2 viewers. Okay, looks like we lost one. So we'll stay with this a minute, and if we can get everybody online, we'll go ahead and start with this. Also, I was saying earlier, I want to make sure that we address one thing in charts, and that is the problem that we have with counseling and giving advice astrologically. I have known of cases in the past where people have gotten themselves in some deep trouble by giving counsel that was divisive and produced problems in somebody's life. There was a case in Massachusetts, I know, where a person actually was sued, an astrologer was sued, because they had given advice to a woman that she should leave her husband, and that the relationship that she had with her husband was not a healthy relationship, and it might not have been. But what came out of that advice and her giving counsel was a civil lawsuit that caused her a great amount of grief, called alienation of affection. Alienation of affection. And that lawsuit proceeded in the courts, and she lost the case because they had recorded that session and they had evidence of it, and they came after her with a vengeance. The husband did. So, you know, you need to be wise, and there's a scripture that says, "Be wise as a serpent, but don't be one." You have to recognize that you can get yourself entrapped and in trouble using astrology if you use it incorrectly, and if you're not also able to really give advice in a way that's counseling and not detrimental to that client. And the same thing, I believe, goes for health issues. Health issues are very important to understand in a chart, and maybe to forewarn somebody about the potential for problems in their life if they don't address these issues. For example, if somebody has a heavy sun affliction, the sun represents the heart. And they may have a potential, and like in my case, I have Mars squaring my sun. That can produce heart problems, heart attack, actually, okay? So I see we have Carol Newfie on the line. I want to welcome her and hope you'll stay with us for the next session. Roughly 55 minutes left of it. And if you have questions, feel free. Aprilius is on. I was waiting for him. I was hoping he'd come on. He's a great fan of ours. We enjoy having him on. He's got great questions, and he's always obviously an astute student of all this this astrological stuff. So I just enjoy having him back. Also, so when you want to be careful when you're giving advice, one of the things that happens sometimes, you can create psychosomatic illnesses by telling somebody that they're likely to have something. The power. Husband and Carolyn. Oh, great. So Carolyn and Rick are on from Newfoundland. So that's great. So what I'd like to say is you got to be careful in the way you counsel people. If you counsel somebody that they have a propensity for a particular problem, that can produce problems that are brought on by their strong belief in something. I believe in the power of the mind. And if you, as there's a scripture says, as a man believeth in his heart, so it is. So if you've convinced yourself that you're going to have a particular ailment or problem due to an astrological advice, that can produce its own reality. I honestly believe that you could have a very powerfully detrimental effect on people's lives if you don't take those counsels, those bits of wisdom you might discern from a chart, and be very careful with them. I remember working with Carol and Rick, who are from Newfoundland, here the other day, and we were looking at a chart, and she had surgery for colon cancer some time back, and evidently she was cured of it. But one of the things we were looking at the chart, and we were trying to find specific something to the colon, and it was a little difficult. There was strong Mars afflictions and Moon and Saturn and such things you expect to find with cancer, which is what often produces that. But one of the things I happened to note as I was looking at the chart was that there was a Neptune conjunct Saturn. And Saturn is paranoia and negative beliefs. It's fear in other than good, okay? Jupiter's optimism and faith in good. That means that you put Saturn and join it with Neptune. Neptune is illusions. Neptune can be, we call it vision, dreams, fantasies, anything to do with the imaginary world. And I've often seen that Saturn conjunct Neptune can be hypochondria. And I'm not suggesting necessarily that this person had that, that led to her surgery. Who knows that? I don't. Obviously, you like to give credit to the physicians that they're doing what they're doing because the person needs it. But I do know that that Saturn conjunct Neptune, which is the planet of illusions and deception, joined with Saturn, joined with Neptune, can produce hypochondria. Fears, which is Saturn. Saturn represents fear and negativity and depression and pessimism. So you add that to Neptunian influence, and you can have that colored into a great imagination. And so every little hurt or a little bit of if you catch a cold, it's going to be pneumonia. You know, you get a little pain in the chest, and it's got to be my heart. Those are hypochondriac type of thinking, and very often people with that will be racing to the doctor every time they have a little problem that they think might be imaginarily much greater. So that's one thing to look at in a chart. The other things, when we talk about afflictions in a chart, I spend a lot of time on these. People say, well, Ron, why do you spend so much time on these crosses and these negative energies? And because people have them, and they're the real part of the chart that touches their life very dramatically. I'm not a blue sky astrologer. I don't believe in, it's a great day to go shopping today because you got Venus doing this. I'm not that kind of astrologer. And I teach my students to go for the juggler. That's an awful expression maybe, but I teach them to go for the juggler. And by that I mean go right to the heart of the chart and see something specific that they're going to know is absolutely a case in their life. And I feel that that's urgent. I do that all the time, and sometimes I do it when it shocks people. I had a couple clients here the other day that came for readings, and I don't usually do readings for partners, whether they're married or not. They weren't married; they were boyfriend, girlfriend, but they came for reading, and I said I don't normally do this kind of reading for people when they're together because they're very private and very personal. And so what came out of that was the response was, don't worry about it. She said to me, he knows everything about me, and we're very open and honest about ourselves, and we don't have any problems. So don't sugarcoat anything, she said to me. And my response was to her immediately, looking at her chart, when I saw her chart, was a very violent Mars in her 5th house, afflicted, heavily afflicted. And I said, does he know that you were recently raped? Now that's going for the juggler. And I stepped right out there with that. And she said, looked me square in the face, said, yes, he does. He knows all about it. And if I had been with him at the time, I don't think that guy would have been in very good shape. And I said to her, I said, this was a date rape, and you didn't report it. And she said, that's true. She says, how do you know that? I said, because it's a 5th house. Date, romance, 5th house, party time. And, you know, it just spoke to me. The chart spoke to me. So that's what I mean by going for the jugular. I see we have a question here. Raul, he's back. Great. Great to have Raul back online with us.
He's going to do your reading. He asked for it.
Oh, he asked for my date of birth.
What time were you born? What time?
Oh.
What time?
He says,
what time were you born?
He wants to know what time and date I did.
Aprilius is 28 years old.
Aprilius is 28 years old, young man. Didn't he ask me how old I thought he was the other day?
That's right.
And I didn't answer. I didn't know.
Can you give any definition about the 6th house?
Can I answer this first?
The 6th house ruler, since we talk about health.
Okay, can I do this first? Sure. Aprilius is 28. Okay, Raul asked me for my date of birth, and you gave it.
Time.
Oh, time of birth. How does he know my date? Okay, I was born November 28, 1939, and I was born at 9 a.m. And I was born in Detroit, Michigan. And I might add that my birth certificate says 9:30. You say, well, Ron, why don't you use 9:30? Well, I did for years. But as I worked with my chart and progressions and transits and all the influences that I saw in that chart, I realized that the time was wrong by half an hour. So I went back and I started working with 9 o'clock, and it became very much more accurate. And here's what I believe about times on birth charts. Can you imagine the doctor goes, he delivers a child. He's in there working with the nurses, and they're working with the patient. And then he's finished, and he goes back to his office, and it's time to write up a birth certificate. Do you think he sat there, and when that child came out, when I came out, that he said, my God, I want to make sure I get this time right, because he's going to need it for an astrological reading. He sits down, and he probably looks at his watch, and he says, oh, it's 9:30. And he writes that down on that birth certificate. Even though it happened at 9 o'clock, I don't think doctors, especially back in 1939, maybe they are more aware now, but probably not. They're busy, very busy people. And I'm sure that he wrote down what was convenient at the time, and when he looked at his watch at 9:30, which is probably half an hour after my birth. So having the wisdom to understand my chart, it allowed me to correct that chart. It's called chart rectification. A lot of people claim to be able to do it, but it's very difficult, and it takes some knowledge of that chart to really do it accurately. So, so I had another question from Aprilius. Another question.
Can you give any definition about the 6th house or the 6th house ruler, since we talk about health? And what does it mean when the 6th house ruler is located in the 5th house? My 6th house ruler is the sun.
Wow, a lot of questions there. Well, essentially,
Shall I repeat?
no, he wants to know, Aprilius wants to know how the 6th house affects health and how we read it, and what does it mean if his ruler of his 6th house, which in this case is the sun, is in the 5th house, which is behind that house. You know, that's not the way I approach charts, but I'll try to give you some significant meaning to that. First of all, I know we take the 6th house as being the house of health, but I see it more in a different way. I see the 6th house more related to diet, understanding of food and medicine, maybe not so much medicine, but more to do with dietary habits and nutrition and what's good for us and not. I don't see it as a house of sickness, although some people would like to give it that meaning. I don't see it that way. What I see it as is I guess I would say I don't use houses like the traditional astrologer does. I look more to the planets. So Mercury obviously rules the 6th house, so we could say, well, Mercury has some influence over our health. But see, I wouldn't see that. I would say, how does Mercury affect us? It affects our thinking. The word thought, Though, thought came from the Egyptian word for Mercury, which was Thoth, Thoth, the god Thoth. So, you know, to me, it's not really about the 6th house per se when I look for health matters. I'm not like that. That's not the kind of astrology I do. I'll look to see what the planets are doing in that chart and what they're telling me, because they are the messengers, the real messengers of that chart. I believe they are the messengers of God, if you would. They're speaking to us all the time, giving us some message. And your house, your sun being in the 5th house is a very powerful but good position, and to be in that house. And that means that if you told me that your 6th house was ruled by the sun, that means Leo's on that cusp, obviously. And so, you know, I believe. Again, I would have to want to look at the sun's aspects. What's it doing totally in that chart? What are the aspects it's making to other planets? What is the will doing? That's the sun. I will. Keyword of Leo. The sun in Leo is very noble, very determined, very strong. It usually gives strength to body and mind. If you wanted to add its meaning to the 6th house, it probably gives a great appreciation for not just health matters, but it also gives a strong inclination towards purification, purity of diet, purity of food, staying away from things that are very destructive to the body, a knowledge of those things, a wisdom about them. That's generally what I would get. But again, I'm just looking at one thing. I'm looking at that sun being in Leo in your fifth house. So, you know, that gives also a strong, Leo in the fifth gives a strong love of life, okay? And it gives a strong love for romance. People with Leo in the fifth very often are in love with love.
Saying ruling the sixth.
It rules the sixth, but it's in the fifth. That's what he told me, right?
He says, check.
Did I get that wrong?
Definition about the sixth house or the sixth house ruler, since we talk about health. And what does it mean when the sixth house ruler is located in the fifth house?
Which means that Leo, the sun, is on the sixth house. And if he's saying the ruler's in the fifth, that means the sun's in the fifth house.
Right.
Which is what I've been interpreting for him.
Mm-hmm.
Again, it's very difficult to take one part of a chart.
Sun opposing Neptune.
Sun's opposing Neptune, okay. And what else is it afflicting? Anything else?
I'll ask the question.
So it's difficult when I don't have the chart in front of me, because to me, taking it apart piece by piece is very difficult for me. You know, like I say, my nose might look good on my face. It might look terrible on somebody else's, or maybe it looks terrible on my face and it would look better on yours. But the point is that we are all made up of many parts, okay? And astrologically, it's true too. The divine man was something that was understood by the artist to be in proportions. It's all about proportions, okay? So beauty is proportions, okay? Whether the length of the head, the forehead, from here to there to here to here. This was all astrologically and significantly related to the divine proportion, or the divine man, if you would. Da Vinci knew it well, and so did most of the early artists.
Pluto trine Sun and Pluto trine Moon.
Okay, now I got a little bit more about this chart. He's got Pluto trine the Moon and Pluto trine the Sun. Pluto's a very transformative planet. To have a grand trine, are these in grand trine? Is Pluto and the Moon together, trine the Sun, or are these in a grand trine? A grand trine is very powerful. I have a grand trine with my Sun, Jupiter, and what else? My God, I'm slipping here. Jupiter, Sun, and Pluto are in grand trine in my chart. So the trine is a very powerful energy. It represents innately, I believe, it represents coming into this life with special talents and gifts from past lives, things in areas that you've worked on before. And Pluto is regeneration and rebirth. Pluto has a lot to do with
Pluto conjunct the Moon.
Pluto's conjunct the Moon, okay. So, and trine the Sun. So it gives a very soulful, very deep thinking, soulful person.
That's what Raul just said, to feel.
Yeah,
Commented to feel.
Raul just spoke up and said that means to feel intensely, and it also is very sexual, because Pluto rules all that. It also represents somebody that has whose soul has been touched by death in some way, profoundly, and that's because that's what Pluto's about. It's death and rebirth. It's regeneration. It's Edgar Cayce called Pluto the planet of Christ consciousness, and it puts your soul in deep connection with the deeper mysteries of life, the secrets, if you would. That's what Pluto and Scorpio are about. So, and the fact that it's trine the Sun means that you have the will, the Sun.
Pluto conjunct the Moon and Sun trine Moon, I mean.
Yeah, Pluto conjunct the Moon, that's what I've been talking about. Trine the Sun, right.
Raul asks a question, what does a Sagittarius Sun needs to feel appreciated? This comes from a Sag Moon. What does a Sagittarius Sun needs to feel appreciated? This comes from a Sag Moon.
Okay, so I'm not sure about the question. The Moon in Sagittarius is one thing, Sun in Sagittarius is another. You remember the Sun is your spirit. It's your conscious, willful mind. The moon is your soul. Okay, so we're dealing with two different aspects of yourself. What do they need about appreciation? I don't quite know what that means. I think that Sagittarians need to be recognized, ideally, for their wisdom. You know, oftentimes you'll see Sagittarius associated with sports. And that's accomplishments and things of that nature. I think that striving for excellence in a big way is very much Sagittarius. Sagittarius, with the moon in Sagittarius, it means you have a great emotional need for wisdom, great emotional need. You also would have a great amount of wisdom regarding women, and your ability to connect women on an emotional level would bring great amount of maybe benefit in light, and there's a great amount of ability to touch women's lives with that position as well. The Sagittarian energy is wisdom. Yes, it's Jupiter ruled, but we have here again a part of a chart. I don't know the whole chart, and I can't read charts here. I'm not here able to do that. What I can do is share with you. One of the things I'd like to share with you is I was saying earlier, you got a great responsibility when you do charts. What you advise another person and how you present your evidence and your information from a chart, you have to be careful because you can cause problems. And I was telling earlier, if you didn't sign in on when we first started out, about how I know a woman in Massachusetts who was told a woman that she should divorce her husband, that he was not good for her, he was a bad influence in her life. And the husband got wind of that because it was a taped session. And he took her to court and he sued her for alienation of affection. And he won. And that woman lost everything she had, pretty much what she had. It was gone. So you've got to be careful when you give advice. You have to be very careful and wise. The other thing is that there's a lot of times that you'll see charts with major heavy afflictions, like the worst affliction you can ever find in a chart. I say the worst. You know, if you got it, you're going to hate me for this, okay? But the worst is the Saturn, Mars, Pluto affliction, particularly if they're on a grand cross or a T cross. They're all afflicting each other. These can be very rough, and they can produce a lot of problems. And I was saying at the beginning of the session, there's a big difference between reading a man's chart and a woman's chart. In a man's chart, these aspects I just delineated here, the Mars, Pluto, Saturn, will often produce violence acted out against someone. It'll bring out a side of that person that's very cold. Saturn's very cold. Mars is very angry. And Pluto is death. So one of my students that's online with us right now, we looked at a murderer's chart the other day. She asked me to look at it. And we found that aspect very strongly in that chart. He had Saturn, this guy had killed this man along with a few other people. They beat him to death. You know, when we looked at the chart, you know, he had Saturn joined with the moon exactly together. Now, Saturn with the moon doesn't necessarily have to be bad, but it can be if it's afflicted very badly. And in this case, it was by Mars and Pluto, the planet of death and Mars violence. So in that case, when I looked at that chart, the first thing that came to my mind was a cold-hearted soul, a cold-hearted being. Your soul is Saturn with Saturn, okay, with Satan, okay. You can say a satanic soul if you want to get Christianized about it. This can be very, very negative. But again, when I'm doing these readings and I'm teaching this craft to other people, you have to be aware that, you know, somebody can get really upset if they have an aspect that looks like the one you're talking about. There's a lot of things that can change that interpretation.
As you just answered Carol's question, how do we see potential health problems in a chart?
Carol asked, how do we see potential health problems in a chart? That's from Newfoundland, Canada. Carol, the basic thing I look for is the planets that are involved in the crosses. The crosses represent trials. That's what they are. It's why, you know, I've been put on a cross, you know. That's what that is all about in a chart. And there are several things I look for in a chart. One of them is what's Saturn and the Moon doing? If they're afflicted at birth by a cross, let's say they're in opposition to each other, or they're squared, the Moon and Saturn are square, 90 degrees apart. There's something that occurs in that person's life that is very prophetic, and it's very accurate if you start using it in your interpretation. And that's called Saturn chasing the Moon, because the progressed Moon takes 28 years to circle your chart. Transit Saturn, amazingly, takes 28 years to circle that chart. So you have both those planets moving at the same speed basically throughout your life, which tells me something else, that every 7 years, they're going to set that cross up again. It's going to hit that point of that cross again. Those two planets are going to align themselves. The progressed Moon and the transit Saturn are going to align themselves on that square Saturn Moon aspect. Or if it's an opposition, Saturn and Moon, if they're opposed to each other, that's going to get triggered every 7 years. That's where the expression, 7 years bad luck, or every 7 years, that all came from astrological understanding. And if you have Saturn chasing the Moon, it can be exactly what I just described. And so when you have that aspect, you can look at a chart, and I'll show you a chart I did first. I'm going to not show the name. One of my clients that I private tutored in Sweden, I found that this chart here was, there's a couple ones here. Let me find one first before I do this. Okay, this one's a young lady that we did the chart for. So I'll show you this here if I can get this to. How do I get that sidebar? There it is. Okay, let's try this. Okay. Okay, I'm going to try to show you a chart here, and we can look at it and see what we can do with this. Now, let's see if I can make this larger for you. Okay. Now, I made notes. You can see it on the bottom here. This was a person that has Saturn chasing the Moon. If you look at this chart, her Moon is at 24 degrees right here, Capricorn, and Saturn opposes it over here. And so when I did this chart, and then it's squaring Pluto over here. Remember I told you that Pluto is violence. And on the bottom, you can see what I wrote on the bottom of this, that she was kidnapped and assaulted at 14 years of age. That's, again, the 7-14-21 aspect of this kind of cross. If you look at Mars and Saturn, they're opposed to each other, and they're squaring Pluto. This is about the worst aspect a person can have. Remember I told you earlier that I was going to tell you there's a difference between a man's chart and a woman's chart. When I see these in a man's chart, it very often they perpetuate violence. Okay? When I see it in a woman's chart, they are the victim often of the violence. There's a big difference in interpretation here. And in this case, as soon as I did the chart, I said something happened to this girl when she was 7 and 14 and probably 21, but 14 would have been the worst. And that's when she told me that she'd been kidnapped by some big guy. He took her to a vacant house and he raped her for hours, and he released her alive, thank God. And she was only 14 years old. It had a great, humongous, you can imagine, impact on her for the rest of her life. So with Saturn in fear and Moon, the emotional sense of security being disrupted and destroyed by this sexual Pluto. And if you remember, Pluto rules the underworld. In fact, Pluto kidnapped Persephone in mythology, and he took her into the underworld. And that's what Pluto's about in the worst sense. It can be this kind of energy. And this, of course, happened with certainty in this little young lady's life, and a point that could have been very, very, very destructive to her soul and her life. So I'm just sharing that because I want you to understand the meanings of these aspects. Here's another chart I did of somebody that this is here. It says Andrea. Can
you use the cursor to show the planets?
Okay. This chart here is again of a girl and a woman. Okay, she's a young woman, and I kept her name out of here. But anyway, the moon. If you look here, the sun is opposing Saturn here. Exactly 13 and 15. They're only 2 degrees apart. And then it's squaring the moon over here in Pluto. The moon is wide orb. You say, oh my gosh, it's 20 and 12. Well, the orb for the moon is 12 degrees. And Pluto is 6. So if we add those two, 12 and 6, we get what? 20. So this is only 8 degrees apart.
Would you use the cursive waves on that?
I am.
Okay.
Aren't I using it?
You come in 40 seconds later. On
Oh, okay.
on Zoom.
So my wife's telling me that I'm coming in on the cursor. It's harder to see. It doesn't come in right away. But the bottom line is that here's again, is this Pluto, Moon, squaring Sun, and Saturn. And there's more to this. I won't get into a whole reading of this chart. But there's so much going on in this chart that
also in cardinal signs.
Fixed signs, you mean?
Okay.
Yeah, these are fixed signs. Saturn and Aquarius, scoring the Moon and Pluto and Scorpio, and then from the Sun up here in Leo. That's a T cross. It's called a fixed T cross. So when you have this kind of energy, she was in a relationship with happened to be a Muslim drug addict, and he was father to her newborn child. He was a black gentleman, and he was very abusive to her. He threatened her life. He threatened the mother's life. I really cautioned her to make sure she tried to get that girl and her daughter and her grandchild away from this gentleman, and she moved her to another country, literally, to get her away from him. And it managed to give enough time for the relationship to come to an end safely without any damage. But this was very threatening, and I saw it as very dangerous. And that's, again, comes back to the ability of you to counsel someone and to give them advice that can maybe prevent problems in their life and prevent trials.
Out of sign aspects count as oppositions.
Say that over again.
Out of sign aspects count as oppositions.
Out of sign aspects don't weaken them or don't cause any. If you have an opposition from the end of one sign and the beginning of another, let's say it's still an opposition. I don't see it as necessarily changing the interpretation so dramatically. I'm not really into a lot of these little technical things. How do I say this? I'm not into detail. Maybe it's because I'm a Sagittarian. I tend to look at the overview. They say a Sagittarian can't see the trees for the forest, where Capricorns can't see the forest for the trees. And so I can't see the trees for the forest. I'm not into the small minutiae, the little minor details that preoccupy a lot of people in astrology. I look for the heart of the chart. I go right for as I said earlier, I go right for the jug. I look for the main aspects in that chart. And I look to see what's really causing and producing challenges in that person's life. And so the main, I'm just hitting highlights of these charts. Obviously, there's a lot more to them. But I think that when we're doing charts, we have to recognize that, let me see if there's anything else I have on this particular, this is another chart I can show you. Remember I told you, and I need to reaffirm it again, that the difference between a Mars, Saturn, Pluto aspect in a chart, in a woman's chart and a man's is quite different, and that's because they tend to act out differently. Now, this is a woman that was in an abusive relationship. Her husband was a bodybuilder. He's a very abusive guy. He threatened her a lot. He threatened to kill her if he ever left her. And she was kind of trapped in this marriage with 2 boys. And I did counsel her, and it really saved her a lot of grief, quite frankly. I told her the first thing she did, he left her and went out and left with another woman. And then he called home. He called child services and had them come out and claim that she was abusing his children, which was not the case, of course, but he was trying to do something to hurt her. And when child services came in, they looked at the children who were doing their homework. The house was speckless. It was a beautiful house.
See your face.
I know they can't. I'm showing them a chart.
All right.
So what happened was they came in and they saw what was going on, and they said, this is not a child abused home, and these are children not abused. And of course they realized that there was nothing to the claim. I told her immediately, I said, oh, he took $100,000 out of the bank also in addition to that, left her penniless, told her he'd never give her a penny. So my advice to her was, she had a credit card. I said, take all the cash off that credit card, which was several thousand, use it to hire an attorney. And the next time he calls you or contacts you or threatens you, you just tell him to call the attorney, because you're no longer talking to him about it, and that it would be up to the attorney to deal with him. And of course, within a week after that, he was laying on her porch step begging to come home. So what she does after that's her business. If she takes him in, that's her business. I really didn't care to know after that, but the advice helped her a lot, and I know it kept her out of trouble for a period of time. I don't know whether she went back to him or whether she decided to break it off. And I didn't want to follow up. When someone doesn't call me back or ask for more advice, my feeling is generally they're doing something they think that I might have suggested against. But I always tell clients, anything I tell you, it's, you take it with a grain of salt and you do what you think is best for your life. I'll never judge you by what I tell you. If I tell you to do something and you do something contrary to that, I always affirm it to them. I say, don't ever feel like you owe anything to me. I'll give you my advice. That's all it is advice. Whether you take it or don't, I'll never judge you for it. And I've got many cases, I can guarantee you, and relationships with young ladies that are going in and out, a yo-yo thing with these guys. They go back and forth, and they can't understand why their lives are hell. And they know they should get out of the relationship, but they don't. Okay, so again, they can call me anytime. I can counsel them. I don't judge them. I say, why? I don't say, why did you go back? I don't do that. I say, look, you've got lessons to learn there, and you've got things you need to grow and understand. So, whatever you do is fine. I'm just here as a counselor. I'm not here to tell you what to do or not to do.
Let's ask a question. The birth chart shows what kind of talents and problems we are born with, but does it show what we should try to develop? In a sense, we are our charts, or we become our charts.
Oh boy, Aurelius wants to know, do our charts show our inherent talents that we have? Yes, they do. They're God-given gifts. Grand trines show evolvement and evolution from a past life in a particular area that those trines represent themselves, what the planets are, what the indicators are. The squares and the oppositions are karmic. They represent areas you need to learn, lessons you need to learn. And that's why we come back, incarnate again, because we haven't learned it in the past. And so these crosses and these trials are there for our teaching. The important thing to know about crosses in a chart and trials is that they're all transcendable. The difference between a chart that has Saturn on a cross and Jupiter on a cross is quite different. Jupiter is Jesus, Jesus, okay? Aurelius would appreciate that, the Greek name, of course. If we look at Saturn, Saturn is pessimism. It's looking backwards always. Christ said to Peter, get behind me, Satan. Satan represents Saturn. Saturn, that's where they got their Satan from, was from Saturn. So we're dealing with consciousness. We're dealing with archetypes. And these archetypes are speaking to us all the time. So if a person has Saturn on a cross, that means they generally have a hard road to go, because they don't learn to stop living in the past and remembering and regretting and recrimination and guilt, because that's what Saturn is. Saturn is Satan the devil, and the Bible is called the accuser of our brethren, he who accused our brethren before God both day and night. That spirit of accusation, self-directed, is called guilt. And people that have Saturn on crosses generally walk around in guilt all the time and living in the past, not forgiving themselves or not forgiving others, because that's what Saturn's about, keeping you feeling guilty, okay? And cursing, accusing, finding fault. It's not my fault, this woman I gave me. It started in Adam and Eve. And the woman said, well, it's not my fault, the serpent made me do it. Well, Adam says, it's not my fault either. The woman thou gavest me, she made me do it. That was the fall of man. And they were in a place called paradise. Paradise means beyond, para means beyond, and dice means to divide. They were beyond division until Diablos, the devil, Diablos, divide, di, abalos, abolish, divide and destroy, comes in into a place that was beyond division and introduces a concept of duality. And the Adam's apple, they didn't eat of a tree of an apple tree. Adam's apple is right here in your throat. That's Adam's apple. And it was a misuse of the word that caused the fall of man. The misuse of your words are what caused your fall. It's your I cannot, I am not. All all these words that we use that show that we're not whole, we're not complete. Or when we say things, I'm sick and tired, what do you think you're saying to yourself? You're putting that in your mind, in your subconscious mind, where it breeds and grows until you have sickness and fatigue. Or he's a pain in the ass and you wonder why you got hemorrhoids. Or it breaks my heart, I'm brokenhearted over this. What do you think that's doing to your soul and creating in your heart? Problems in your heart. Okay? The Word is made flesh, but he grew in grace and in truth. The Word is made flesh, it says, and he grew in grace and in truth. How are you growing? Or how are you dying? You might ask that. It's not what goeth in your mouth that defiles you, it's what comes out of your mouth. That's what defiles you. Okay? That pure soul, that subconscious, it's pure receptivity. It's feminine receptive. And it believes and takes in everything you say. And it gets seeded in the subconscious. And once the seed's in there, it's going to grow. It's going to grow. It's going to manifest. You know, there's a scripture. It's an interesting scripture. I used to read that in my early years when I was a very bad guy. And I used to say, I hope I didn't do this one. But there's a scripture says there's only one unpardonable sin. And that's called blasphemy against the Holy Ghost. Blaspheme. You know, blasphemer is swearing. It's swearing, cursing. And the Holy Ghost is your subconscious mind. The Holy Spirit is your conscious mind. I'm in good spirits today. But maybe on a soul level, I might be suffering. The soul could be going through a great amount of turmoil. But if I'm putting seeds, blaspheme, I'm cursing my own soul, putting seeds in my subconscious mind, the Holy Ghost, I'm going to have to live out and experience the growth of that seed in my experience. And that's called karma. What I've sowed, I'm going to reap. So if you're putting curses on yourself, I'm sick and tired, he's a pain in the ass, I'm pissed off. How's that for urinary tract problems? Okay? Or many other kinds of problems, you know? I could go on and on with the words. I have a whole chapter in my book called The Word. It's all about words we use that destroy our lives. And there's just so many of them we use, and we don't realize these little simple sayings, how destructive they are. And the more you repeat them, the more they get into the subconscious. How do you think you memorized your multiplication tables when you're young? How did you do it? You repeated it over and over and over again. Guess what happens? The subconscious picks it up, and it gets planted in that seed in the subconscious mind, and then it manifests in your life. Whatever it is you put. That's why music's so bad today. The dangerous stuff they're playing on these music, this rap stuff. It's inculcating in our youth awful, terrible things about women and sex and all those other things. And what's happening is we're polluting the subconscious, the soul of the nation with this kind of stuff, this music, okay? And it will have its effect. As a nation, we're going to experience great problems because of this, okay? And that's happening in our schools, where you see these shootings and all these different things happening in these schools. You say, how can this be? We grew up, there was never that back when I was a kid. You didn't have mass shootings in schools and people going like crazy in these areas. So again, this is all understanding the soul and the spirit. That's why you, as an astrologer, you have to know that that's what this is all about. It's about understanding these mysteries and teaching them to others. Get my book if you really want to understand all this. Get my book, The Greatest Story Never Told. You can get it on Amazon or Kindle. It'll open your mind to astrological wisdom and knowledge that's been kept from you for centuries. Okay?
We have a question from Patricia. She just came online.
Okay.
She feels that she has difficult aspect with her Saturn. It's in the 10th house. Capricorn squaring my ascendant Neptune, and Gemini moon in the 7th.
Okay, let me try to get this. Patricia?
Yes.
Says you've got Saturn in the 10th house. And it's squaring the ascendant and Neptune. And Gemini moon in the 7th.
Right.
It's squaring it too. It's squaring his moon. Saturn squaring his moon in his ascendant. It's a difficult aspect. Yes, it is. Saturn squaring the moon. And Neptune. Generally, when I see that aspect, if I see Saturn squaring the moon, I usually experience, my experience taught me that there's been a great amount of early child trauma that involves the parents. Generally, it can be separation, divorce, separative energies in the home. Saturn represents alienation, separation, divorce. And squaring the moon, which is the home, okay, and your security and your sense of security. Very often that's been compromised in your life at some point. And then you've got Neptune involved in this. This can often leads to seeking escape. Neptune wants to escape the realities of life, so it can be through movies. Somebody likes to go to movies where you just totally step out of the life as it is and you enter a world that seems real, but it's really shadows on the wall. Think about it, that's what movies are. And so, or you look for escape in drugs and alcohol very often with Neptune. There's two indicators of drugs in a chart. One is Neptune, which is alcohol, and the somnambulistic type of drugs, things that make you sleepy, the dream state of Neptune. Uranus is more the new age drugs. It's more of the uppers, the cocaines, and the hallucinogens and things like that. That's all Uranus, which is the awakening planet. Uranus is the rules Aquarius, which is awakening. So what's that?
LSD,
pot, LSD. Yeah, all these things are mind-changing drugs and mind-affecting drugs. So this is very often what I see with these kind of aspects, but I don't know your particular chart totally. I do believe that Saturn squaring your, from the 10th house, squaring your moon means you do have Saturn chasing the moon. So periods in your life that may have been more difficult would tend to be 7, 14, 21, 28. Those periods in your life when these things kind of chase themselves around that chart. And if you look, it can be off a little bit. The moon can move sometimes. The progressed moon might move 10 degrees a day, which is a year, if you're doing progressions. Or it might move 14 degrees a day. So it could be faster, slower, or whatever. But if you do the progressions in your chart, you'll tend to see these two stay in relationship to each other quite a lot. And they'll trigger off that Saturn, Moon, Neptune.
So what shall we watch for?
So what should he watch for? I would say, again, I don't have your whole chart. I don't know the powerful powers in that chart of redemption, but I would watch for depression, negative thinking, getting into accusing, not only others, but yourself. That's part of what Saturn's role is. If you doubt that, read the story of Job. That's what his test was. He came down to Job, he wiped him out, took everything he had, wiped out his life. Just almost destroyed him, but he did. The Lord said, you can't touch his life. And after he lost everything, said Job sinned not anything he said. He said, the Lord giveth, the Lord taketh away. So he didn't curse God, which is what Saturn or Satan wanted him to do. So you've got to really keep that consciousness of not getting pulled into accusing, self-accusing, which is guilt, and accusing others, because that's when you're guilty, you accuse others. That's just the way it works. The more guilt we carry, the more we find others. We call it scapegoating. Is that not Capricorn? The goat? Okay. So we're going to blame somebody else for something that we are guilty of. That's how we tend to do. So anyway, so you know the old saying, you got one pointing the finger out, you got three coming back. And that's how accusing is. You know, we got this sense of guilt, and that's why we're finding others to blame. So anyway, I would say be real careful with that. Also, Saturn and the Moon, be real careful with alcohol. And this can be, I don't know the rest of your chart, so I don't.
37 years old.
Okay, so you've went through a lot of these cycles already in your life, and I don't know how accurate that 7/14/21 is, but if you look back, I'd like to know how accurate it is.
Weren't you offering a special for 149 for the live stream participants?
I guess that's a question from
me.
My wife said I was offering a special on to live stream.
Today's date and time of birth.
Yeah, my wife mentioned to me that we offered a special, I think, last week, and I extended again this week for a full reading for $149. We can do that on Skype, and you'll have a personal reading. And we can look at the chart in its entirety and see what's going on, and also look at the progressions of transits and see what the indicators are for the year ahead. But that's available, and if you want to call and set up an appointment with me, you can do that.
What was the special?
That's astrological reading. It's normally $250. I'll do it for $149 for those that are on live stream with us. Just we'll make that available. It's an hour's reading roughly. That'd be about an hour reading, and We'll record it on Skype if you want to keep it. And again, we'll look at the progressions in the transit in the year ahead and see what's going on. So you can call me or send an email to Ron@Pentex. Ron@Pentex is pentex.com, Ron@Pentex. Or you can call us at 978-413-3933. And we can set up a time and a date for that Skype session. That's $100 less than I charge normally for a full reading. So it's an extraordinary deal if you don't know that. So anyway, it's so this is available to you if you really want to get a full reading. We had any other questions? Is that it pretty much?
Well, the young gentleman from Greece, Aquarius, kind of was wondering, he said that he's in love with, where I'm trying to go off the way up here, he's in love with heavy metal. And he was wondering, where is he? Something.
Is it a music group?
Heavy metal is the
music.
It's not the music group. It's the
A genre of music. Genre. Excuse me.
Music, yes.
I'm not very familiar with all that, unfortunately.
Heavy metal is like heavy rock, you know.
Mm-hmm.
He was like wondering if it was satanic in any way or.
Okay, the question Aprilius has is you know, he has a great attraction to heavy metal music, and he's wondering if it's satanic. All you have to do is ask yourself, the best way to access your subconscious mind is through repetition. That's the easy way. You can keep saying something over and over until you memorize it. When you learn to drive, it was all a conscious activity until eventually it's all in the subconscious and you just don't even know you're driving. You're not thinking about it because it's all done autonomically through the subconscious mind. The other way to access the subconscious mind is through hypnosis, which can be therapeutic if it's done right, with the right kind of influence and people around you. Another one is meditation. I highly recommend meditation and meditation techniques that can be facilitated by some amazing computer-generated software today. I also recommend the other way we access the subconscious is, most importantly, is chanting. The Catholics have the Rosary, which is really a powerful way to access the subconscious mind. It keeps you on track and keeps you moving in a direction that is life-giving. And the other way that we access the subconscious mind is, unfortunately, to our detriment, is music. And if you're listening to music and to messages that are life-taking, not life-affirming, then you're setting yourself up for problems in your life. And it can be very destructive to the soul. And there's not any discrimination anymore about what we look at and what we listen to anymore at all. So you can defile your soul. And it can happen unconsciously because that's where the soul is. You know, Mary said something interesting in the Bible. She said, "My spirit rejoiceth in God, and my soul doth magnify him." Because that's what your soul, your subconscious does. It magnifies that which you have put into it. In other words, it expands and it grows from that little seed that you put in that subconscious mind, on that fertile soil of the subconscious mind. And as you keep putting that input in there, I remember giving a lecture one time to the National Health Federation, and there was a woman in the back of the room that raised her hand, and she said, "Ron, I think all this is great, but you know, what can I do about all this stuff my parents have put in my mind when I was younger? All this negative input that I was given as a child that when I'm more receptive, of course, that's when your mind is very receptive. And what can I do about that? I mean, I can't pluck it out." And that's interesting because that's similar to the question that they asked Christ. They said, the enemy came and sowed tares in our wheat field last night. What are we going to do? Should we go in and try to pluck those seeds out? Because it's going to grow up with our crop, and tares look like wheat, but they're worthless. It's not wheat. And being farmers, they understood the language, and he was describing this to them. He said, no, he said, let them all grow up together. Because if you go in and trample down and try to get to the seeds, you're going to destroy whatever is good in there. Don't go in there and mess with that. It's kind of like laying on a couch with a psychiatrist. Let's delve in there and let's try to get this out of there. You know, it's not the way to go. So what does he say? He says to them, let it all grow up together. And when they reach maturity, we'll separate the wheat from the tares and we'll burn the tares. And he was using this as an analogy of the subconscious mind, which is what we're dealing with here. So when the woman asked me the question in this room, I explained to her, I said, you can't always pluck that stuff right out of there. It's in there. How many times were you told as a child, don't go outside without a coat, you'll catch the death of pneumonia? Well, you don't catch pneumonia from going outside in the cold. You catch pneumonia from being inside a closed-in room with no circulation where the bacterial count raises, and you get sick from being in that room when it's cold outside. So it's a lie, you know, but you've been told that lie. Don't go outside without a coat, you'll catch death of pneumonia. That's one lie. There's many more I could use for examples. In my book, I do for children, things we say to our children that's destructive. But anyway, back to the subject. I told the woman in the meeting, in this lecture, I said, if you have a cup of coffee, okay, and you look at the coffee, it's not pure water. It's not pure at all. It's got a lot of different things in it here. So I want to purify this coffee. How am I going to do it? I can't separate the coffee from the water, but maybe there's another way to do this. What if I turn the faucet on and I let water go in this cup? Eventually, it's going to get clearer and clearer and clearer until what happens? It's pure water again. How have I accomplished the cleansing of this cup and this solution? I've done it by simply adding good water continually, good thoughts, good input. I do it continually until, guess what? Eventually, I purified my soul. And if you think that's crazy, listen to the scriptures. Listen to what it says. The scriptures tell you that's what you're supposed to be doing. It says, seeing you purified your soul in the disciplining of your spirit, in the unfeigned love of your brethren. Listen to the scriptures. It's telling you exactly what you're about, what you're supposed to be doing. Seeing you purified your soul, the subconscious mind, in the disciplining of your spirit. What's that mean? It means disciplining your conscious mind. What are you going to allow to go through there to that feminine receptive subconscious? What are you going to impregnate that feminine receptive subconscious with? Good thoughts or bad? Because whatever you put in there, you're going to get back. As you sow, you're going to reap. So what it's saying to us is, seeing you purified your soul in the discipline of your spirit, your conscious mind, your willful mind, in the unfeigned love of your brother. What does that mean? It means unfeigned. Love that's true, really loving others. But you can't love others till you love yourself. That's where forgiveness is so important. That's why Christ spent all his time teaching forgiveness. Because if you don't forgive yourself, you'll never be able to forgive anybody. If you don't forgive yourself, you'll never be whole. You'll always be divided and alienated against yourself. That's what guilt does. It kills us, really. It sets us up for all manners of diseases and everything else. That guilt that we carry is going to destroy our life. It creates depression. Depression produces emotional problems. Emotional problems produce physical problems. It's all related. There's a beautiful scripture that says, a merry heart doeth good for the bones. People that have a lot of depression, Saturn rules the skeletal frame, the teeth, the bones. People that have a lot of problems with their bones, their skeletal frame, arthritis, pain in their joints, on and on and on. Most of that is in the consciousness. It started here in depression. Instead of having a merry heart that doeth good for the bones, they've got an unhappy and a depressed heart that causes problems in the skeletal frame. And the more they carry it, the more the arthritis sets in and other kinds of pains as they get older. So you need to understand the relationship. It's all connected, my friends. Once you start living and loving and understanding that, and loving yourself first, that's the key to it all. And loving yourself is not an ego thing. It's not about what a great guy I am, strutting down the street with, a little cockiness. That's not what it is.
The last question, and we're going...
We have another question.
From Phyllis, the last question for tonight. Can I make an astrological question? How would you interpret Sun in Cancer in the fifth house, opposing Neptune in Capricorn in the 10th? What problems do you correlate this with?
Well, the privilege, you ask me a question to take a piece out of a chart that is not whole. And I can't emphasize enough that's very difficult to do. And I know your great questions, okay? Sun in Cancer opposing Neptune in Capricorn. I honestly, there's not enough there for me to read, okay? I would need to see the whole chart to see that. It's like you show me your nose and your lips and tell me what the whole face looks like. I can't do that. I'm not good at that. I'm a good reader if I see the whole chart.
One piece of a pie, gotta have the whole cake, sorry.
Yeah, he said, okay, he responded with that.
I did, yeah.
Oh, my wife said one piece of a pie, you gotta have the whole pie.
Patricia, by the way, to whom you did this reading, she's greeting us from Spain, and she's not in the south where our friend lives, she's all the way in the north, close to Portugal. So
Okay.
it's a European team here and Canadians.
Who is this?
Patricia, to whom we did a reading about her Saturn, and remember a little bit of a difficult aspect there with Saturn chasing.
Oh, okay. Patricia. Okay. So you're in northern Spain? Northern Spain.
Pontevedra in the Galicia region.
In the Galicia region. My wife can speak all these languages.
Galicia.
She can say the names and I can't. But you know, I'll slaughter the name if you give it to me. But the bottom line is that, you know, we've got an international group here, don't we?
What time is it? What time is it in Spain?
What time is it in Spain? I'm curious. People staying up late, I think, sometimes.
Spain? Oh, come on. It's, yes, you know, remember 10 o'clock we served dinner.
Yeah. So we got a wonderful group here, and I'm so thankful you guys make this happen. It doesn't happen without you. I mean, I can't sit here and talk to myself. It wouldn't work, okay? There's a saying, the speaker's edified by the hearer. Well, you know, we've got an international group here, so it's really fun. And, you know, invite your friends if you have people that are interested in this, and can make this into something a little larger than it is. But, you know, there's just so much time and so much we can do and how much we can share. The most important thing is what? Is you want to change your life, you want to see amazing changes in your life, begin praising and giving thanks. Begin praising those around you that have helped you get where you are in your life. Begin praising the mate and the lovers in your life that have made your life what it is. Begin praising the people, whether it's your childhood parents who maybe are still around, for what they did give you, even if you may think some of it was a little stern or stressful. But understand that all things work together for good, and praise and give thanks for that. Know that this is the key to life. Praise. The scripture says, let the fruit of thy lips be the sacrifice of praise. And in all things give thanksgiving. It says all things work together for good for them that love God. Walk in faith, not in fear. Fear is Saturn. Fear and division and separation, alienation, divorce. The major words in a marriage that break it up is you always and you never. I didn't forgive you then, I don't forgive you now. You always and you never do this. You know, that's great to break up a relationship.
It's 2:10 a.m. in Spain.
It's 2:10 a.m. in Spain.
And
My God.
I think it's about 3:10 a.m. in Greece.
And 3:10 a.m. in Greece. You guys are late night people. I'm like you. I do better at night. I'm terrible in the mornings. Now that's not a good affirmation, is it? But I know my life and I know what I'm about. And I think that the noise on this planet has a lot to do with disturbance and making the mind tired. You know, we've got all sorts of microwaves and different types of communication gear in the air all the time. And I think some people are more sensitive to it than others. And I for some reason, at nighttime, I wake up again and I feel more vibrant, more alive, more in touch with things. During the mornings and the daytime, it's like, you know, maybe it's the heat of Miami and this particular area we're in, 90-degree days. But anyway, you guys are great. You've been amazing, supportive, and to come back every time, you know, like this you have over the last 3 weeks. Is this the third week we've done this?
Yeah,
only 3?
I think it's well, they are night owls.
Yeah.
That's right.
So all you night owls out there, thanks for staying awake for this and joining us, and I really appreciate you. And you know, if you want to call me, my number is 978-413-3933. If you want to schedule a reading, take advantage of this offer. I really do this. I'm giving a great Skype reading for $149. Listen, you know, there's some people on this watching here that have spent $250, so they're going to know you're getting a deal. And so they're going to hear for sure.
Yeah, good night from the Netherlands.
Oh,
so
good.
We maybe should stay up a little bit. Bridget Willisman, I should say, she's the Netherlands.
Who's somebody else?
She's watching
Who?
from the Netherlands.
The Netherlands is on. Bridget.
We're going to stay up a little longer because my cousin lives in the Netherlands. I can't miss this.
My wife's got a cousin lives in the Netherlands, so she says we should stay on longer because you're online with us. My gosh, we are an international group, aren't we? We surely are. This is amazing. You know, it's amazing how we can touch base, and it's Aquarian age, right? The age of communication and brotherhood of man, and all these things. And here we are sitting talking to several different countries right now, and all communicating. I wish we could all see each other. That would be even more wonderful with Skype. I don't think there's a way to do that with Skype, but you know, that would be even better. But I hope you'll join us every Saturday at 7 o'clock. And my wife had to remind me today. I was sitting in my chair almost asleep. She said, "Ron, you got a session here at 7 o'clock." I said, "Oh my God, that's a half an hour from now." So she'll wake me up if I slip it. But anyway, we'll look forward to seeing you next Saturday. If you need, be sure and get my book, The Greatest Story Never Told, on Amazon or Kindle. I promise you, you'll be glad you got it. All of you that are interested in this message of astrology, mythology, psychology, scriptures, this book will open your heart and mind to so much vast knowledge. Some of the top scholars in the world have read it. One of them said it should be compulsory reading for every thinking individual. And that's from one of the top scholars in the world. He's a professor of linguistics, University of Illinois. He's a Fulbright scholar. He speaks understands 48 languages. And he read my book, and he called me. He said, "I've never called an author in 17 years about a book." It's the most exciting book I've ever read. And I've met with him since several times. We took him to, was it Dartmouth? We took him one time. He came up to Boston. And we drove him up to Dartmouth for a linguistic conference up there. But he became a good friend of ours, and Dr. Adam Mackay is his name. So again, we've had a great time tonight, and I thank you so much for hanging in and staying awake. And if you want to reach me, ron@pentex.com. That's PENTEX, like X-ray, ron@pentex.com. Or you can call me at 978-413-3933. And of course, I think that we have an 800 number that works in Canada and the US, and it might work from Newfoundland, by the way.
Yeah.
And so Karen and Rick, you could try that number and see if it works with from where you're at. It's 1-800, it's 800-382-4667. That's 800-382-4667. I know it works in the United States and Canada. I'm sure it would work up in Newfoundland as well. So all of you out there, the international community, thank you so much for joining us. Thanks for being here and supporting us. And we look forward to seeing you next Saturday at same time, same place. Signing off.